It's taking a little bit. Hey, Joan, how's it going? We're back here with Uncertain Futures. I hope our regular listeners didn't miss us too much. There were some technical issues on my end, which I derived some inspiration from, but we'll get back to that later, I suppose. How have you been, Joan?
Yeah, but okay. I mean, you could have just pretend we didn't have technical issues and say that, which is also true, that I just I'm technically in my exam period for college. So I've just been doing loads of work for college, and it's I was gonna say it's been boring because like I haven't done anything else, but the work for college has been interesting. But yeah, I have no life other than that.
Yeah, I suppose that's an uncomfortable level of effort to have to apply while coping with the current circumstances.
I know they just expect so much of me.
For anyone who can hear it, there is some interruption audio wise. There's a small gathering. I'm sure they're taking all the necessary precautions, except that they're directly out my window. So I'm very warm because this is a west facing room, but I'm sure I'll cope.
Yeah.
I'm getting some impression from, say, our most loyal fans that they're not able to access the video. So let me see how to address that. For those of you in the future who are having no trouble listening to this video, I'm very sorry, but it'll mostly just be clicking noises as I try to find a different place.
Which is everyone's favorite content.
Clicking noises. Yeah. Well, I think instead of relying on the clicking noises, I'll go ahead and give the general introduction, which is of course that here at Certain Futures we take the sort of disturbances to our lives that have occurred recently and ask the question, what other big changes could happen, what other alterations of our daily lives, but also of the bigger picture that we might not be sort of anticipating, that aren't part of some continuous trend. And we also look at people trying to do this in the past and the kinds of funny mistakes they made, but also the insights they had.
Well, a funny mistake. Well, I mean, when you try and predict or think or forecast things are going to happen, I mean,
oh yeah, it's inevitable.
Does it count as a mistake if you get it wrong? I mean, because it's hard to hard to say.
I think it can count as a mistake. I think it can, because you end up with people who can sort of make a career out of certain types of predictions, and then if they're sort of I can't remember the name of the guy who wrote that book, The Population Bomb, and he was anticipating that we were all doomed.
Well, that's very vague, so I can't really.
Yeah, no, I think what's problematic in that case is that it's very much a very specific prediction. He's not making it in a sort of speculative way. He's making it in a very sort of prescriptive way, and he's non-responsive to the fact that not only has his prediction not panned out and doesn't look like it's going to pan out anytime soon, it's also the case that a lot of bad things have been done. I think he's more like a prophet. And less like either a scientist or a casual futurist. But I mean, I'm saying all this while forgetting his name, so that's how seriously you should take my criticism.
Yes. But there's always people there's always people telling us we're doomed, and yeah. I mean, we are doomed, but as any regular listeners will know, we like to take the more optimistic approach here in Uncertainty, or we always happen to seem to be trying to look at the good side of being doomed, the silver lining of doom or something. I don't know, but we just like to keep it different.
So now the question is. Oh, boom. Okay, I have a new link and it works, and so I'm gonna A, post that to me, but B, send it to you right now.
So we have a different link.
Yeah, no, I mean, I did it again. I don't understand exactly why these links are different. This isn't rocket science, and thankfully I just talk about people doing science. I don't actually. Anyway. So you've got the link. I'll post it into the Facebook thing. And then we are good to go.
So, do we need to repeat that introduction now? Like, I was a bit unclear, like where our audience are with us. Like, have they just?
I think that the likely eventuality is everyone starts in the beginning, and as in most viewers are in the future, however uncertain that is. But I think the people who were pointing out the original problem with the link have already clued back in, and they are also relatively familiar with the format. So
Yeah.
I personally, given that I have had no Joan future stories, past things, funny little documents, charming examples of. I think there was just a lot of that in the last episode, in the previous one, and I believe it is your turn to start. Is it not?
Is it? I don't know. It's been so long. I can't. And also, the future is area of expertise, not the past. So I couldn't say. I couldn't possibly say. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, not expertise, but no, I think you should hang on. I'm just now sending this link to someone, so I think you should do a little bit of
A reintroduction.
a fluff for a few. No, just I don't know, just tell a nice anecdote or something for 2 minutes, and then I'll be ready.
Very good. Well, I just don't want to. I want to avoid all anecdotes that could, to anticipate the story, since it's going to be coming up.
It doesn't have to be about the story. Just from your life, Patrick.
What is this? Okay. No. Well, I went to the beach today. And it's very hot for those of you who don't live in Dublin. It's 27 degrees here, which in a normal hot country, of course, is just a pretty hot day. You know what I mean? But in Dublin, it's almost 30 degrees, which there has never been a day recorded of 30 degrees in Dublin. And for us to get...
Wait, there's never been a day recorded where it's been 30 degrees
in Dublin. Nope.
Sorry, what? Seriously?
I know, yeah. It's pretty crazy, isn't it?
That's weird.
Yeah, no, it's there's in the center of the country, kind of in the Midlands, there have been temperature recordings of 30 or over. Not much over though. Dublin, we've never reached it, and I'd say we will soon. I mean, the fact that we're getting it now and we're still in May, and we're getting 27 now, suggests.
Yeah. I am a bit nervous because I hear that like last summer here there was like days. There was like a period when it was like multiple days when it was like 40 degrees, like over 40 degrees, and I just was not. I didn't sign up for that. I didn't think it got that hot here. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to rethink my plans for living here, because that's too. I mean, 30 is already too much for me as like a typical weak Irish person in terms of heat. But yeah, 40 is like it's just not okay.
Yeah, no, 40 is pretty brutal. Especially if there's any hint of humidity, 40 can really tear you to pieces.
Yeah, yeah, but we're not here to talk about global warming right now.
No, not unless we have some weird spin on it.
Yeah, it's all about the weird spin. Yeah. Okay. So Patrick. Ik heb gedacht dat ik mijn deel in het Nederlands vertellen zal. Als dat oké voor jou is.
Yeah? Yeah, Patrick? Yeah, that's totally cool.
Versta je mij?
Didn't catch it.
Versta je mij?
Versta je. Do I hear you? Understand? I don't know. That's my guess. But
wait, just a second. Yeah. Oh, it's not working.
Oh, you. Oh,
do you understand me?
Ah. Well, I'm glad that I guessed it.
So I was just sorry, it's very obviously under rehearsed here. This is me using Google Translate, right? Then the little like, which I've been using quite a bit, like the little, when Google Translate uses like a little audio, like you can make it say the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I've been using a bit because I'm doing like online Dutch classes now. So I was learning Dutch before in like normal in a class, and now it's online. And like it's just there's not much, So a lot of the work we're doing now, we don't have as many classes as we had before. So like, and for me, something I struggle with is sometimes like the pronunciation, like the intonation and stuff. Yeah. So I don't really like. I kind of have to rely on this little Google Translate saying a thing to like check, like, oh, does that sound, or like, how does that sound again? Because there's all these weird vowels and the like, and there's like very like small, like different combinations of vowels with like very small like differences. So like I'm learning Dutch because I live in a Dutch speaking place, so hopefully it'll like, if I get somewhere with it, if I get further with it, give me more job opportunities. But I was thinking then, what if we didn't need to learn different languages like in the future, and we just have like universal translation devices, which so I got this is a little bit specific. Again, I've gone for a like slightly boring topic, but
I don't think this is boring at all. I think that this is big time stuff right here. I mean, if you can, crack that nut.
Big what?
Said if you can crack that nut.
If I can crack, I mean, I'm not promising to crack any nuts, but
no. I mean, if universal translation can be delivered.
Yes, exactly. So let's just imagine, like, first of all, so obviously this has like a history in sci-fi. So apparently the first time it came up is in like a short novel from 1945 called First Contact by Murray Leinster.
Okay.
Sounds like a made-up name, but a very like 50s American name. And so it's like there's two ships kind of meet each other, and it's like one ship is like a human crew, one ship is an alien crew, and there's a kind of like sort of have a face-off. Like they want to learn from each other's technologies, but they also don't want to like the other one to be able to track them back to their planet and like just come and destroy it or something. But then so they kind of like try to get to know each other, and they have in this like some kind of automatic translation device that can translate like the human language for the aliens and vice versa. And apparently the aliens don't use sound, but they communicate using microwaves emitted from like an organ in their heads. And so one of the human characters points out, from our point of view, they have telepathy, but from their point of view, of course, so do we. So this kind of, I suppose the idea of like which links to a previous topic of mine, which is telepathy, that was so intentional. So this thing of like, just like understanding people. So from the outside, it's just like, it's sort of, it often feels, even when you see people speaking a foreign language, sometimes it's just like crazy that the other person is understanding those weird sounds, that like, and also the fact that there's so much more to the language than words, which we can talk about as well, like that, like, and how even with when people know each other, like even just one word or even body language, can communicate so much as well. So it's like, I just thought that was kind of a nice sort of thing about this idea of like, to the aliens, they think we can sort of read each other's minds because we have also totally unrecognizable form of like language. So anyway, like it's this idea that basically it also like it features in a lot of things like Men in Black as well, and like Star Trek, and it seems like in things like Star Trek, which I'm not really familiar with, so I'm not going to talk a lot about Star Trek because I don't want to like say stupid stuff. But from what I gather, this whole universal like the translation device thing, it's kind of just a convenient thing for them to have in Star Trek. for the purposes of just like speeding things along and like, oh, we can communicate with these aliens that we just met, or this planet we just arrived on, or whatever, or these people have just, these creatures, because, it would just be awkward if every time, every episode that they meet a new species, they have to like, do an intensive language course and be on their Duolingo like for like half the episode before they could like have any kind of real heart to heart or conflict or whatever. So it just seems convenient. Like in that, it's a bit implausible from the descriptions I read. It seems like it's like, oh, we just have this device, and often you don't even really see the device. It's just we know that there is some translation, but then it's like some of the characters, often the characters' mouths actually sync up to the like English words instead of the language they're speaking, and it's inconsistent. But I suppose this idea, like, so it's been around for a while. This idea of like, oh, well, with technology, maybe we could just instantly translate what someone is saying, so you wouldn't have to know the language they're speaking or learn it. And there are actually a lot of like this actually isn't like futuristic now, because it does exist. And I was just looking at various like reviews of different translation devices. There's loads of different ones. Like usually for like a couple of $100 you could get some kind of little device, and there's like a limited amount of languages, and there's different some of them will just translate like very kind of basic level interactions like on the street or if you're trying to buy something. But then other ones are like a bit more I don't know, have bigger like databases, or they usually, a lot of them work through an app or like internet. But I do remember that I do remember when I did a German exchange when I was like 17, that my partner had this kind of thing. I don't know if it had a speaking function, but it was effectively like an electronic dictionary basically. So It wasn't with internet or something. You could just search words and then which I suppose like Google Translate or something, which as much as we make fun of like the translations from Google Translate, it has gotten so much better
they have improved massively,
so so the thing is, I would say, so let's just think of like, okay, what's useful, so like useful stuff of this. So it does exist, and like say it seems to be used in kind of like business. Like it seems like one of the biggest markets is like say Chinese to English or something. Like, and I have met people before who they were like, oh yeah, I was that they were telling me about meeting some like Chinese tourists, or I think they were like businessmen or something, and they just got out this device, and it was just for English and Chinese. But they were like, we were able to have a quite complex conversation with them just that like using the translation device, and they were sort of like, wow, like the same as these ads I was watching on YouTube about these translation devices, of people being like, oh my god, it's amazing, it's talking, like it's communicating, it's telling me what they're saying. So like obviously, business or kind of like diplomacy, maybe when there's a lot of interaction with people from different countries who don't necessarily who need to communicate, and specific kind of things like that. And as well, maybe like going on holiday, if you go to China or Japan or Italy or whatever, or I don't know, places where maybe you feel like, oh, we don't have a common language, like there's no common language, or people can't use English. But you could use something like that to like, and I suppose people already are doing. I mean, some people. I don't think it's still not, I think, a very widespread thing. But it does exist. But then I suppose there's a lot of problems or limitations. Like I was sort of just thinking, like, okay, imagine. So like, okay, let's first just think. Imagine this just becomes the thing that everybody has. Okay, so let's not think about how. We'll talk in a second about how like realistic it actually is, but so that everybody has the kind of like a little earphone or something, because some of them are both things look like phones, and some of them are like a little earpiece you can wear. Like I actually there was so imagine everybody just uses this. So you just grow up, you learn one language, but then if you travel to other places or you move country or you work, have to interact with people who speak different languages, you just use this and you can. It's all going to be translated into your own language. I just was wondering, like, what kind of world would that be? Like, what impact would that have, if any, on the world, or even like intercultural understanding or something? Like.
I mean, it's a good question. Like
intercultural, like understanding, or actually less, because. like apparently as well, one thing is one part in Star Trek is like that. Oh, if they started using these devices on Earth in the like early 22nd century, and then there was just universal peace between like disparate cultures on Earth because they could just suddenly they people could communicate much more, and then they just figured it all out, all their differences, and everything was rosy. Which yeah doesn't sound too likely. But I was thinking about the aspect of like when you learn another language, you also are learning like you're getting a lot of insight into kind of beliefs, attitudes, ways of thinking in that culture because there's different ways of expressing things in different or in some languages there's words that don't exist in other languages because maybe those concepts are more important in that culture, but somewhere else even the thing of like Irish people, I feel like wherever they go on holiday, they come back and they're like, oh, how was your holiday? Like, oh, yes, it was lovely there in like Spain or like Bulgaria or Japan or whatever. And maybe not Japan actually, but basically they come back and then they're like, oh yeah, it was lovely, but people are very rude. Like, I just feel like Irish people always perceive people to be rude in different countries because just based on the fact that people don't really say please and thank you or something,
Yeah, I
or
mean,
like sorry.
I think it's kind of it's more that Irish people are they have a few features which Irish people themselves, but also people from outside of Ireland identify as friendly. Now, I don't think that it's really the case that Irish people are somehow like better at friends than people outside of Ireland, but there are some superficial cues that we come to take for granted, I think, and that when they're not there, it just seems very odd. And even I go to France, I'm half French, and I still find the French rude.
You still find French people rude?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so funny. And do you think it's because you're raised in Ireland?
Yeah, I think it's partly that. Also, I wasn't raised in like a normal part of France, in terms of like the notions of French rudeness, which are often associated with retail. I don't know. I just, but I kind of think it's partly just because it's true, right? But whether or not it's a bad thing is kind of like rude is obviously making it seem like it's a very much a bad thing. But Irish people go to America. I don't know about you, but when I was in the States, and I've heard this from other Irish people, everyone's like super effusive and friendly, and then sometimes it can feel a bit disorienting because it somehow feels shallow, and I think sometimes we give people that impression as well. I don't know. I think it's just norms.
It's so funny that like Irish people because I really have heard a lot from people like going to other European countries or something, and like especially like Central or Eastern Europe or something, and or even I don't know, maybe like just in a lot of parts of Europe, people are like, yes, but the people are very rude. They're very, they're not very, don't have good, they're very brusque or something. And then Irish people go to America and then they're like, yeah, people are being like way too, like it's like we want people to be just our amount of, like friendliness and polite. But I think really, because that's the thing, you can't help. That's the thing is that even when rationally, okay, this is a different language and culture, whatever, and actually the way people are acting, it has different connotations for them than it does for me. But it's still so hard to brush off. There's just a little instincts of like, for example, someone brushing past you in the street and not being like effusively apologizing or something.
No, that's so like, weird in Brussels. I remember that happened loads, and I just was like, "What's going on? Are there humans inside those bodies?"
Exactly. Like, it's very hard to kind of to deprogram those things from ourselves that are like these small cultural things. But yeah, so I was sort of like, I think when you learn another language, you do start to like those things start to be like are unlocked a little bit, and the more you learn the language, the more kind of are like sayings or like metaphors or attitude. There's I just think it's a really interesting way to get to know a culture, not just by being able to talk to people in that language, but just really seeing how even things are constructed, And I think the more, the further the more different the culture is, often the harder it is to get your head around. Like, it's not just like the sounds are different in your mouth, but it's just like even how they would construct maybe a sentence or even talk like different tenses might have a whole different logic or something to them. So. So I said, like, if there was a world where people didn't learn other languages, then would we actually have less sort of, like what is a conversation in two languages like? Because I watched this, like one of these kind of ads of the conversation devices was like two people on a date with using them, like with with this like in earbud kind of thing.
Yeah.
And oh, it was just very. I mean, maybe people on date it's cringy anyway, like when it's in an ad or something. But it was just, I don't know. It even like okay, first date, it doesn't always the conversation doesn't always flow completely naturally, but it still just seemed very like that there was a block. Like surely, if you're saying something in one language and it has to be, it goes through it gets translated and the other person hears it then translated, and then so the second person is going to be responding to what they've heard translated, and not what the. I'm not saying the translation won't be good, but you know what I mean. There's going to be a gap between the way they've said what they've said the first time, like even just the manner they've said it, or you know, wordplay is totally out, Patrick. What else do you do on a date?
Wordplay is challenging. I'm not gonna lie, but I do think that like, you know, this. Given that we're thinking, you know, big terms, how could this go? I think it's pretty realistic to imagine that this technology could provide a kind of seamless translation that we now really wouldn't expect. So, for example, here's something that would be totally possible with existing technology. I am.
Wait, sorry. What did you say there? Seamless.
Just seamless translation. That it could actually be the case that a conversation could proceed just as quickly as it would have otherwise. The challenge of doing wordplay.
No, I wasn't talking about the gap in time. I was talking about the gap in like meaning and sense and like connotation and everything. Like
yeah, okay. No,
yeah.
I think when you identify like something specific about like say wordplay, then you're fine. But I guess the thing that first came to my mind there was that like the voice that they're hearing the translation in. Now maybe that's insignificant. What if you got sorry, I'm totally deviating here, but what if you got subtitles instead of a translation? Like a translation
what if you got
subtitles.
What?
How would you feel about that?
Subtitles.
Yeah, if you got subtitles.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's funny if you're on a date and then you like person's voice is obviously like, you know, part of their body. Like there's something to do with the attraction is like I just think a date is actually an interesting example of this because it's like a heightened version in terms of like body language and you know what you pick up in terms of cues and things. So like,
yeah, but like when people are speaking in a second language on a first date, they are dealing with probably even more interruption of the kind of natural flow. I mean, I think of my mum when she came here and met my dad. She wasn't here long. He definitely didn't speak very good French.
But that's the thing. You don't need to. That's why it's sort of like funny to think like it would be almost weird. It's almost better to have a date with like where you can hardly understand each other and using devices. Like you know, it is weird, but it can be a positive. So like I've had like dates where I'm speaking in a different language, and it's like it's in some ways it's almost like a positive because like you like well I don't know, you kind of because you maybe there's I don't know, like you can if there's less that you can say, like depending on your language level, you know, you can remain a bit mysterious.
Yeah, it definitely helps.
So I'm wondering, but then would you have a different? I'm just wondering, would it give you kind of a false sense of a person if you're then like, yeah, you're hearing someone, but then you're hearing a different voice in your ear, like you're basically listening to a whole different voice, like
that,
you know.
I actually think it would be very possible to make it the exact same voice, even in the different language. It's already the case.
No.
There's already software that allows someone to take a recording. I mean, it doesn't have to be a specifically made recording. Frankly, they could just take your voice on this podcast over the past few episodes, and then they can
it's like a deep fake,
AI,
but like
exactly. And then they can teach it to be able to replicate your voice saying anything. So then you can just type words into it, and it'll say it in your voice. So if you can do that, you can definitely get the translation voice to be a
okay. But it's still kind of funny that like it would be like a fake me, you know, a fake version of whoever, it's not a real. It's weird.
It'd be cool to listen to yourself speaking other languages. That would actually be real funny.
Oh, weird. Yeah. So it kind of already leads into like this one, which like problem with this, which is like well, I suppose that's the thing. Like I know we're more thinking just imagine. Yeah, it's really it already exists and really good, but it's really good. But like kind of going back to my thing of trying like using Google Translate to try and like pronounce these like Dutch words, and then that it's just really not. It's so it just doesn't show me. I don't know. The intonation basically is like so far like where we are currently. you can use Google Translate. Like, you know what I mean? If you were with someone and you needed to try and, if you were like in a situation where you need to try and communicate with people, you can use Google Translate. Like, and probably a lot of us have done it, and you can get things across. You know, you can figure things out. You can communicate what you need to communicate. But when it comes to like the Google Translate talking, or a lot of these voices talking, it's still very far from what like you know, would feel like a kind of conversation to us or something. And like there's also so much like meaning that's communicated in intonation. And so it's just, and I don't know, but if that was overcome, it would become much more natural and enjoyable also to converse with AIs, or like through AIs or something.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
and then I was also wondering, you know, or this is something I've thought about before, that if in the future we interact, like if we are interacting more and more with AI, say, that like speak to us, I don't know, in like smart homes or like in office places or different, I don't know, different scenarios, like our speech patterns in the future will probably be influenced by the way, you know, say AIs or computers are going to speak human languages, and not just the other way around, you know, because it's sort of like, yeah, trying to get them to sound more and more like Alexa or whatever, you know, sound more and more human. But it makes sense that we'll go the other way around. Like the same way that when you know, when you move country, you know, often that accent there will influence you. You know, you'll be
Yeah.
influenced by that, and then maybe your friends will also be influenced by the way, by the words you use, your friends in that country. So you know, it's, yeah. I wonder if we'll. I mean, I don't mean that we'll all sound like Google Translate speaking in the future, but yeah, I don't know what you think about
I
that.
think
Like,
that makes sense. I mean, if you look at like say text, the way people wrote for texts where there were limited numbers of characters, of course, I mean there still are in the context of Twitter, but I'm talking about the text messages, SMS messages. That kind of writing was deemed very strange by people who were typically older or didn't text as much, very improper, and it now the limitation of writing like that isn't there anymore, and yet the writing remains. Like it's just sort of like a habit of communication that was imposed by the nature of the technological restrictions, and even though it doesn't have to be restrictions, there could still be that kind of effect on how we speak. That definitely makes sense. Yeah.
what was the last thing you said there?
Even though it doesn't have to be restrictions, like with the text messages, the fact of interacting with AIs that we talk to could definitely influence how we speak. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wonder then would it extend to like will it extend to how we talk to each other as well? You know, that
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I'd say so. I
because
mean,
you know,
of
because
course, it's
actually a friend
possible.
sent me a message, a voice message, and she was saying, oh, I just she's like, I was trying, she was like, I'm trying to teach my phone to or to use this like dictate option on her phone, that she would just you speak and then the phone would dictate it into a text message. But she said that she was like, she didn't realize that she was just trying to speak clearly, but she didn't realize that there's actually this sort of kind of way you have to, like, you have to dictate the punctuation as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, and then so it's actually, you know, that you have to, I suppose, learn a certain way to yeah, dictate your message to get it into the form you want. So, and I suppose that people do the same with like Alexa, or they know how to try to say things into, you know, if it's listening to your voice, how to say it. And then there's also the problem of those people who, because of their accent or things that they're never recognized, you
Yeah.
know, and there's like the bias kind of there of like which voices are recognized and not, and that's a whole topic for a whole other time. But yeah, I just wanted to, there's a few people commenting here
Yeah, there have been
about
some
this.
pretty hilarious comments actually up there.
Oh yeah, like, well, what do you want? I haven't been.
I think let me see, Jen. Is there a social currency?
Oh yes, that Jan is saying the social currency associated with learning another language. So like with
Oh,
partner, uh, you know, you might make an effort to speak, to learn their language or learn. So she talks about somebody, a friend who married a French woman and learned the marriage vows in French. But yeah, even though obviously she would understand it in English, but it was just like a kind of, I suppose, yeah, a symbol that you're kind of trying to, yeah, learn something of their, or
yeah, I think it is
speak their
powerful.
language, literally.
I mean, if I learned a language for someone, Jesus, that would be a pretty big deal. Um, there is always the kind of like long-standing thing that if you speak, if you're speaking your second language in another country, so obviously from our perspective, that's people who don't speak English as a first language. You are, and there's kind of quite a lot of research on this. I think you are consistently estimated to be slightly less intelligent than average because of that.
Mm.
Or like then like on average people are estimated to be less intelligent. So someone would be, there is basically some kind of penalty that no one seems to be able to sort of overcome.
Yeah, and I know it's awful, isn't it? Like, because I've been in that position, being the person like speaking the broken language, and then you really see, you know, and you're in a certain, especially working in a certain context, like, and you are just like working as a waitress, and yeah, the way sometimes even the way people talk to you, you're like, wow, they're talking to me like I'm stupid, and you perceive that like. Yeah, you perceive like, oh, I'm the person now who's seen as like not being so intelligent, not being so quick because the way I'm speaking, I have to simplify what I'm saying, and it's so frustrating. Like it's so you're like, yeah, and then but yeah, you like you said, it's just this kind of weird penalty. It's sort of this cognitive thing that we're like listening to people, and even though we know that's not their first language, they're from another country, but because people are simplifying it or not, you know, bringing across all the information, maybe they complexity of information that they could in their own language, our brains are just like, oh yes, simpleton. But I wonder if this kind of thing would then get rid of that. I mean,
you see, I think there's a good possibility that it would have like that while there are some sort of uncomfortable aspects to dropping learning other languages, which for example CGP Grey, my favorite YouTuber possibly, basically thinks that we should just stop teaching people second languages because these devices are on the horizon, and that there's lots of things we should be teaching kids, and many of them kind of have more predictable value. And I'm not sure I'm particularly comfortable with the perspective, but I definitely think that the prospect of being able to use something like that, it turns like fluent communication with someone from another culture into a very kind of case specific, very like hardly won skill into something that is accessible to a lot more people. And I know that our recent experiences with social media and the kind of polarizing, you know, lies and etc. that have kind of propagated from it make it seem naive to assume that mere connection would be some kind of panacea. But I do sort of think that overall, if the experiences of people, because it's not like social media really gets the experiences of people in, you know, Indonesia and gets people in America to sort of comprehend and empathize with those experiences. That I don't think that really is a result of it, which it is one of the things that people expected. And I think that a big part of that is the language barrier. And that.
But there's also a problem on social media. It's like you're just connected to people you kind of already know mostly. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really. I mean, there's some platforms, maybe on Twitter, and so people interact more with strangers than say on like Facebook or something. But yeah, and now it does. I mean, Facebook, it does translate now. Like if you look at posts that are written in the language, it will be translated. You know.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's things about the architecture of Facebook that or Twitter, you know, as well, that make certain kinds of negative interactions get rewarded much more than positive interactions, etc. And that those things are they're not unrelated to the greater connection thing, but they're not a necessary result of it, I think.
Yeah. Going back to we do have to come back to some point to something about the you know, we talked before and the very first episode, I think, about like predictions from the 80s about like technology bringing us like more democracy or more participatory democracy or something, and then we were talking about like Twitter and stuff. But yeah, it'd be cool to come back to sort of.
Well, Twitter has stepped up its game, Joan. They're censoring, or not censoring. Well, they're fact checking Donald Trump's lies for the first time.
Oh yes,
it's true bravery.
True bravery. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Maybe we should. I don't know. Thinking, the future, where social media is going to go is an interesting.
It is interesting, yeah, because it doesn't seem like its current. Doesn't seem like it's going to be stable in its current form or something.
Yeah, I don't know, especially the younger people using
social media.
As in, you're not going to look into yourself, or you will have no part in any episode when we talk about that. Like, you're like, I will boycott it.
You can You can look
do it on
it
my
up.
own.
You can look it up. I won't do the actual presentation on
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's not exactly something I have a
it.
huge interest in, but it is very like it's one of those things. It's like it's very
Impactful.
it's very there,
Oh,
you
it's
know.
very there. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's become. I think it's one of those things that yes, we kind of talk about like oh, and it's oh, on social media. You know, it's like it's just so you know, it's. I feel like in lots of different, not just like in lots of different circles, people are like, oh, social media, and like there's a kind of little list of like the things of reasons why we think it's terrible, and like some reasons as well why we think it's great, and like it's just like we just trot out those same things, but at the same time, it's becoming so central, you know, like they're so central to or so present or ubiquitous in like our lives in terms of like personal lives, but also like kind of working lives and everything. That you know, I feel like the more ubiquitous things become, the less we talk about them often.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It kind of it
Um,
starts to be taken for granted. It's part of the wallpaper or whatever.
yeah, yeah. But anyway, but that kind of relates to what just another couple maybe before we move into your topic, just another couple of things I was thinking is like a big issue with this could potentially be like the data
Mm.
side of it, of like if there are these devices where our conversations kind of pass through, everything we say passes through, um, you know, where else are those conversations going or being listened to or like
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was one like kind of
there's gonna be a lot of hot mics in the future. I'm
yeah.
surprised there haven't been more hot mics like during the coronavirus. I mean, I thought that was gonna be like it was gonna be hot mic central.
You thought it was going to be what?
Hot mic central.
Well, I think there were some cases of that. Like about it was like so one about some like Welsh MP or something that like start. It was in sort of they were having like basically a meeting of the Welsh Parliament or something, I guess, or maybe it was a smaller council meeting or something like a local council meeting, but it was quite something quite big, I think. Anyway, but yeah, and then one guy there was some kind of a discussion, and then one guy who was involved in that just started kind of effing and blinding about all the like his colleagues because he just thought his mic was off or something, and yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know if it was like recorded or something, or anyway, it just was like in the press, but like yeah, quite
yeah.
bad.
I mean, they like I live in fear of them, even though like I'm not somebody who anyone would ever report on or something. But I still just I'm just surrounded by these microphones, and I'm like, oh shit, who was listening there? I was talking about nonsense.
You're afraid of being cancelled, Patrick?
Yeah, I'm gonna get cancelled. Um,
And we won't be able to do this YouTube radio thing.
actually, I think that's where
Um,
cancelled people go. But um, uh,
wait, a few. Oh, this is also about social media. Robbie is commenting about it.
yeah, he points out that like governments' regulations on the profiteering of social media will. Oh, he's actually written more. Yeah, would determine the future. I think that's true, but I also think that like there's more.
You're mumbling there. What?
Sorry. Well, I suppose yeah. I'm simply reading the occasional word, but he's talking about how government restrictions on the ability. I mean, I think that what Robbie's writing is definitely very accurate. There's a guy who I listened to talking about this, who kind of. I mean, the thesis essentially for social media from the people who seem to be the most responsible, the most forward thinking is they can't have these kinds of profit margins, because they're made possible by an advertising model that is entirely predatory. So ultimately, like there's a number of ways to get there, but I think the most important step is that the goal of your software service provider or internet service provider or your social media provider or whatever cannot be to have your eyeballs on it for as long as possible, and for your scrolling through even video games, like traditionally, though there are now many that have that model, that wasn't their goal. People did spend lots of time, but at least the purpose was to provide a service that people were satisfied with. The purpose was not to use a person's sort of predispositions to kind of certain kinds of addiction and certain kinds of social outrage, etc., to get their attention for as long as possible and ultimately get them to buy stuff. I think that's not a model that I personally would like to see thrive going forward.
It's just not sustainable.
No.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of more or less what. Well, the only other thing I was thinking about the sorry about the this translation kind of thing, because actually one thing maybe it's also interesting is Robbie like commented what comes first, universal language or universal translator, but I really don't think that I don't think we're going in the direction of like universal language, because maybe this is opening up a whole other conversation, which let's not right now. But I just feel like it's going more in the other direction. Like the thing about one thing I was also thinking, we were looking into, but I don't really have so much time to talk about now, is like the future of English language, because so many people, learn. There's so many more. I think there's like 5 non-native speakers for every 1 native speaker of English. And so there's just so many Englishes now. There isn't like a standard kind of English. And so, so actually, even though some languages are getting really big, there's also kind of a splintering in a way. Not splintering, but like obviously they can be mutually understandable. But then there's also these kind of like Hinglish, like kind of Hindi and English and Spanglish and like America. A lot of people like kind of Latinos in the US kind of speak a mix of like English and Spanish. So I feel like it's, even though a lot more people are learning like a few big languages and English is a big one. That actually, I don't know, I just still feel like we go towards like, more making things our own or changing them and kind of like dialects and all this and this kind of stuff. And those things, in a lot of ways, I think those things are no more on the rise or more accepted or more celebrated now, these kind of different like versions and things of languages. So I think we're kind of going. I think we're not in a moment of standardization of English. I mean, there was a period where they kind of tried to do that a bit, I think, and like the Oxford English Dictionary, but I think they kind of gave up on it. They kind of let English, like, fly in a different direction.
It's not a very prescriptivist sort of approach compared to the French approach. I do think that that's definitely going on, and we could expect it to continue in the future. I'm not sure if that counteracts the rate at which languages are going extinct and the rate at which more people are learning English. And once enough people learn it, it is kind of a universal language, even if there are enough. I mean, people from Morocco can still converse in Arabic with people from Syria, despite the fact that the Quranic Arabic has been divided for a very long time.
Yeah. But I suppose I just don't know if people will, like, I still think the thing is the way people think about a lot of places, the way people think about English, it's not like they are. I just don't think we'll be so quick to lose all the other languages. You know what I mean? Like, I know there's some minority languages that are like dying all the time, which is
some slower than others.
Unfortunate in a lot of ways, but I still think that just most people in the world, I think speak. Well, I didn't actually look into this, but basically a lot of countries in the world, it's common to speak more than one language. In Ireland, yes, there is Irish, but I suppose say like in. Yeah, a lot of people in Ireland don't necessarily speak another language.
English-speaking countries, the average is
we are an English-speaking country. But what was I going to say there? Like, I just don't think we'll be so easy to give it. Like, the way people think of English, for a lot of people, like, I know a lot of people who speak a second language, but they kind of, it's like, English to them is almost just like actually worth less because it's just a language to communicate, like a lingua franca. Like, this is just a language we use to communicate with people. And like, they're like, yeah, English, but they're like, yeah, but in my language we have all this kind of, like, because there's a version, there's just the English people speak who are not native speakers, and I just feel like I don't see people speaking that, but then not necessarily giving up the other languages that they also speak. But I think it will get but I just
in some regions though,
I feel like it won't take over and become the only language, like.
Well, I think it becoming the only language would, if you thought it was going to happen, you'd have to acknowledge that it'd be a very, very long time away, and even then, there's just a lot of chance that goes into that. But in terms of like even with everyone learning it, that does push out a lot of languages. Doesn't push them all out, but it does, like, because in a lot of places in the world, like you say, people speak multiple languages. Sometimes people will speak 3 languages, and one of them will be a kind of lingua franca-ish for the region. One of them will be and then there'll be two like much more local languages. And then if you add English to that, I just think it's more likely that you see that some of those smallest languages continue to get pushed out. And there's still a lot. Anyway, that's a sad story that is not the topic of my discussion.
Yeah, well, where are we going with you then?
Indeed. Well, let's see how far we can get. I'll be honest, this is a big topic. And so there's a possibility that eventually there will be a sequel. But it's a topic that I sort of think really speaks to the core of some of the themes, as I see them, of uncertain futures. And one of those themes is just about not knowing what's possible, I suppose, which doesn't really sound like a theme now that I say it, but it sounds too specific. And I'll just say outright, the subject matter is materials, right?
The subject matter is bacteria.
No, materials.
What?
Materials.
Material?
Materials, yes.
Okay.
No.
They said bacteria. You're like, I'm just gonna say that there. I'm gonna talk about bacteria.
just accept it. No. So materials. Since we've said it 5 times now, we may as well seek to define it. So I'm curious, John. How would you define materials? What is a material?
What is a material?
Yeah.
What isn't a material? Like stuff, physical stuff in the world. Like, I mean,
that's a pretty good answer. To be honest, that's a pretty good answer. It does also seem to. I mean, it's interesting. Our meaning, not just the meaning I'm using now in terms of matter and stuff in the world, but that meaning and a number of other meanings that we have for materials, like of importance, etc. Go back a way. Josh was excited about the bacteria. He's making that clear. But so the Latin meaning of material and our meaning of it are basically the same. And there's also something which is true then and now, which is that a component of it seems to be what you do with the materials. So they're like, like for building stuff, for example. So that's just a common meaning of it. And in some sense, which is relevant to what I'll discuss, materials are, I mean, you can define them in the physics sense of saying it's just stuff in the world, or you can define them in this pragmatic sense in terms of we can do stuff with it, right?
Okay.
Obviously, the second one is even vaguer than the first one because because you can do any.
Because I could do stuff with your emotions, Patrick. But like, does that make them material? All right, that sounds like I'm gonna like, yeah.
That sounds dangerous.
But
but okay, so there's something I really like about the idea of kind of materials as a source of sort of progress, because it's not the same as innovation. It is possible that many of the materials that are interesting were kind of manufactured very knowingly, but in other cases it wasn't so knowing. And we can just find things that inherently possess properties, and the great thing is you just can't necessarily predict what those properties are. And sometimes, and we'll get to these later, they can almost seem to violate the laws of physics, because there's something emergent about the structure or the interactions of the molecules that we couldn't have predicted because we didn't invent the universe, I suppose. So the first example of being told about something like this, it was actually totally a thought experiment. It was Mr. Kelly in high school, and we were learning about objects in collisions, and one of the things that's important is the coefficient of elasticity. So that basically determines how much bounce you get off a given surface. And then he said, well, what if I had a bouncy ball and it had a coefficient of elasticity of over 1? So 1 is like the theoretical max and nothing can do it. That means it basically just keeps bouncing forever. But over 1 means that it starts to bounce higher and higher each time. And of course, if it keeps doing that, eventually it's going to hit the roof. And then it'll start accelerating as it bounces between the roof and the floor, etc. And then it like fires at the roof and shoots towards the moon and bounces off the moon.
Patrick, are we talking about Flubber?
Is that what Flubber does? I've never seen Flubber. I don't know anything about Flubber.
Did you not see? You never saw Flubber?
No, I never saw Flubber. No.
Do you know what it is?
Is it have Eddie Murphy in it?
No, it has oh
I've never seen it.
oh my god, Robin Williams.
Oh, I do like Robin Williams, but he was
way better than Eddie Murphy.
He's certainly got a good legacy now.
But
he did do a lot.
Okay, so you're not talking about Flubber.
That was just an example of a purely thought experimenty material idea, and there's a lot of thought experimenty materials out there. In fact, physicists and engineers like to refer to them kind of jokingly as unobtainium. So something that has a property that doesn't actually work in some physics sense, but that could be very useful for performing some kind of function. Anyone who has seen the 2009 mega blockbuster Avatar will have heard the word unobtainium used to describe the material on the planet, which the colonists were so interested in. And I'm actually going to start with that material because it's a very, very good example of something that theoretically could be out there, and if it was, it would have a huge impact on our lives in terms of what was technologically feasible. So and it's funny because I don't think it's a truly amazing film, but it had some really cool sci-fi elements, and with a lot of them they didn't feel the need to sort of explain them, which you may or may not approve of.
I hate explanations in sci-fi.
Yeah, it can really bring it down, I think. Because
the thing is, it's a careful balance, like to introduce like a concept of like something that's like it doesn't really exist in our world right now, but like could or whatever, or does in this world. To introduce that concept and tell you enough about it that it like functions in the story and gets your mind going like wow, without telling you too much, so that you're like, oh, I can't suspend my disbelief because that just sounds so bullshitty. Like, for example, okay, my pet, I was thinking pet, like the worst one of those for me is is it called Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey? The way they talk about, God, is it gravity? No, I can't even remember now. The way they like.
Well, they deal a lot with gravity in the sense of like time dilation.
Yes, but just the way that they talk about gravity, and like, I mean, I am no physicist, but I just did physics for the Leaving Cert. But still, like, just the way they just keep having all these, it had too many parts where they try to explain what's going on in this. They're like, but obviously, in a sci-fi sense, and like, I don't mind the things being made up, but it was just. I just couldn't go there with them. They just, the way they describe, I can't remember what exactly, like, talking about gravity in a way that just doesn't make any, I don't know.
I mean,
I didn't like it.
What broke that film for me was just that it was fundamentally incoherent, and it made me do a fair bit of work to work out that it was incoherent. You know what I mean? I had to like gather my thoughts.
Wait, so you did research to make sure.
I was like, what was going on? I just had to be like sure that it was a paradox, and it is, and not the kind that's like zany and possible. Anyway, the veracity of Interstellar aside, in the context of
sorry,
that's okay. No, I don't want to start ranting about movies because I personally can kind of lose it a bit.
Could go all night.
But
on the subject of movies, Patrick, after we have this conversation, which is the wrong order to do it in, but anyway, after we have this conversation, you have to go and watch Flubber, okay?
Okay, I will consider doing that.
And next week we'll be discussing Flubber.
Anyway, did you see Avatar, by the way?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay, so do you remember the floating mountains?
No.
Right. Well, there were mountains that were floating.
A long time ago.
It's over 10 years ago, I suppose.
Whoa.
There were these floating mountains, and they floated because they contained large deposits of this superconductor. And I'll tell you what a superconductor is in a moment, but one of the things about it is that if it was out there and could, they can be created, that's clear, but if it could exist at a low enough temperature to kind of be deposited in the planet and just sort of be operational, it exists at a high enough temperature because they need to be cooled down a lot to have the properties of interest, then they would actually float of their own accord in a magnetic field as produced by a planet, and so you would actually get floating mountains. So that's actually something that could conceivably happen if the material is out there. And like I say, the material is definitely
cool.
Yeah, I know, it's super cool. And the material is produced, like we can produce superconductors in labs. It's typically the approach has been to cool certain metals and certain alloys down to very low temperatures, and then they can have superconducting properties. Recently, people have been doing it at slightly higher temperatures with ceramics. As I understand it, that's the cutting edge. And now higher temperatures is still like 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is still more than minus 200 degrees Celsius, or less than. So what these properties sort of are is a good example of what I was alluding to earlier, which is a kind of violation of physics. Although it is actually kind of intuitive from the name. So from your Leaving Cert Physics, I don't know if you recall that the current passing through a particular material is equal to the voltage divided by the resistance.
Rings a bell, yeah.
Rings a bell, right. So in a superconductor, the resistance is zero. The resistance just drops to zero because of the conformation of the atoms. Honestly, that part I'm not going to claim to be able to describe.
Okay, but it's just superconducting.
I mean, it's got to do with electrons getting into lower and lower energy states, and then they start behaving identically from each other. So there's kind of like a soup effect of the electrons. But basically, there is no resistance, which means that a current can flow through the material without any voltage at all. Which, I don't know if that sounds weird to you, but it still sounds weird to me.
Yeah, no, it does sound weird to me. Because is there I feel I'm it's reminding me of just
it's a quantum
how much
effect.
physics it's reminding me how much physics I've forgotten. But so a current that has no voltage, is that a current?
I mean, it is a quantum effect. So not that is a description of any kind, but it should sort of explain why it can be so.
That's your excuse for everything, Patrick.
But the effect, so the properties here are things like, yes, it'll float if it's put in a magnetic field. You can pass a current through it with absolutely no resistance. So of course, if we had large amounts of the stuff, we could make a lot of things far more efficient. But we could also have all those maglev trains that Elon Musk keeps claiming he's going to build and then doesn't, would be entirely feasible if we had a high temperature superconductor. And there's a related thing called a superfluid, which I have heard less about overall, but they're pretty nifty. As far as I know, the only one I'm aware of, there might be other ways of making superfluids, is you have to take helium-4, I think it's helium-4, which is quite rare. I think we get most of it from nuclear reactors. So it's a heavy isotope of helium, and you cool it down to 3 degrees Kelvin, or lower, I think a bit lower. And if you can do it with the other helium-3 as well, but it has to be over 0.3 or under 0.3 Kelvin. So you have to cool it down to cooler than the vacuum of space, and then it can become.
That sounds like a great line from like a recipe book or something. We're like, and now take it out of the oven and just cool it down to cooler than the vacuum of space.
Yeah. And when you do that, another cool thing happens with the fluid, which apparently, and again, don't know enough to describe why this is. It is to do again with electrons going into lower and lower energy states, and then suddenly the electrons all become sort of identical in their energy states to some degree, which makes them behave as basically the flow of the particles in the water is perfectly uniform. There is no jostling between any of the particles. They just flow in a uniform way, and so. If 2 of the cool properties that you can get out of this, I'm sure there are many more. One of them is that if your beaker that you have your fluid in has any microscopic cracks in it, then the superfluid will just flow through the cracks. And then the other one, which is truly crazy, is if your beaker, it doesn't matter how tall it is, the superfluid will climb the sides of the beaker. If you don't have a cap on it, all the superfluid will get out. This is actually, the climbing effect happens with all liquids, but usually friction prevents it. But with the superfluids, it can't.
Okay. Wait, Josh is saying some things in the comments that I don't really.
It implies
understand.
infinite current under non-zero voltage. I think, if he's pointing out that you still end up with this zero in your equation underneath voltage, and that therefore, if voltage is anything, then you do end up with a massive current. I don't believe that's what happens. I think it's just that when you're using a superconductor, I don't think that you can really apply the same concepts of resistance in your calculations.
Wait, you can't really?
No, I don't think you can. I certainly don't think that you suddenly end up with infinite current once you use a non-zero voltage. But I'm sure Josh knows that, of course. But anyway, so this whole material thing, just to kind of go through the history just a tiny bit. I guess what might have kind of come forward in my descriptions of those materials is that materials can sort of be a bit magical, right? And what that comes down to them having these properties that we might not necessarily understand when we first find them. We often can't predict them, despite having scientific models that kind of account for them once we found them. And the stuff that they do can seem like it violates our intuitions of how the world works. But there are people who
I suppose it's interesting. Reflection on like what seems magic to us, which is basically like things that are not obeying the laws of whatever the world or physics that as we know them. But like I suppose in the past there were things that people were amazed by that now are just commonplace to us. So it's it's interesting what when we are amazed by things and when we are not.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a sidebar. But yes, it's true. There are amazing things out there. There's a lot of material we don't know much about. Most people don't know much about, I suppose.
Yeah, no, the world abounds, I'm sure. Oh, one fun thing actually to mention about the superfluids is that I think the most popular theory, or at least a popular theory about the inside of neutron stars is that they consist of a superfluid, but of a very different nature.
And a bit of caramel as well. No.
But I shan't go into my cursory knowledge of neutron stars. Instead, I will discuss the fact that people have, long since sort of been obsessed with materials. Like the fact that, I'm now pointing out these scientific reasons why some materials could be interesting and stuff like that. But the interest in materials of having interesting properties goes way back before those kinds of scientific ideas were there to accommodate them. It was always believed by many people that you could find. The Philosopher's Stone is a very, very famous example, but the entire field of alchemy, which eventually did sort of become a real science, in terms of becoming chemistry, that had a notion about materials and about their properties, and about often kind of spiritualistic ideas that were being imbued upon these materials, which, while sort of incorrect or something, I think speaks to an intuition we have that there is stuff out there to find that can do stuff for us, and that goes back to moving up the metal hierarchy, but also if you go into ancient times, there was, over generations, people would get greater and greater understanding of how to work materials for their benefit, and sometimes that's information that we don't do a very good job of remembering, sometimes to our detriment. So I do remember hearing of how the what's the name of the old now I'm blanking and I feel terrible. The in Greece, the site on top, the site where all the temples are in the top.
What? What are you talking about?
In the center of Athens.
The Acropolis.
The Acropolis. I was going to pee and I was tripping over myself. The Acropolis. The Temple of Athena in the Acropolis. There was a mistake made whereby they put kind of standard iron bars to support the insides of the pillars, and it caused the rock around the bars to degrade. And people who were studying it said, "Oh no, actually, the ancient Greeks would have covered those bars in lead so as to prevent the erosion. And they're even kind of more, I don't know if you've ever seen a Roman pier or known that you were seeing one, but Roman piers are still around, despite the fact that they're exposed to the constant abrasion of the ocean. And there are piers of smaller scale that have been built by modern kind of 20th century engineers that are already getting destroyed. And the reason for that is that the Romans had they used a complex, and I don't think it's a fully understood combination of materials to essentially induce the seawater to have a reaction with the concrete, so as to grow, so more concrete was constantly being added over the years.
What?
I know. And I mean, I guess they lasted a long time, but still, the idea of having, how do you get the feedback when your pier is lasting like hundreds of years longer, but it's also lasting that time like long after you're dead, to sort of learn from it. I think it's really impressive. And anyway,
those Romans, that really was their speciality. The old engineering, civil engineering projects.
Absolutely, and we don't, like I said, we still don't know exactly how they did it. There's lots of stuff, I mean, in terms of materials that we aren't fully clear on in ancient civilizations. Even Neanderthals, they had this glue that they would use to stick the spearheads on, and we don't know exactly how they made so much of it. But obviously we've had our own sort of recent history in terms of materials, and I think probably the most dramatic example is plastic. And obviously plastic hasn't gone so well in people's I mean, I agree, it hasn't gone terribly well. Now I think that shouldn't make us ignore the fact that it's a truly amazing material. I mean, that we can do things with plastic that we would never be able to do with so many other things. In terms of, it's easy to work in lots of different ways, and you've got different types of plastics that accommodate for different types of strength. It doesn't degrade, unfortunately. But it has sort of, I think it certainly speaks to the ideas of the show, because if you lived in the world, the year the plastic was invented, and then you fast forward, and I don't know how long you'd have to go, 15, 20 years, it might be that the most striking thing about the world that was different to you, even though there would be a lot, it might be that it was just this stuff that was lying around everywhere that was like perfectly shiny except for little scratches, but it was much lighter than any metal you knew, and it could sometimes be soft, and it could sometimes be made to click into itself, and all this kind of stuff. I think that it was a massive change, and I think that it's definitely very conceivable, especially now that we are so understandably hostile to consumer reusable plastics, or discarded plastics, is that we could end up with another new material that could be used for a variety of different functions, and could similarly make everything seem different. And in the best of worlds, it could come with new kinds of functionality. So there are.
It's very interesting area actually, like sort of even like kind of new material, like material, like lastly creating new materials, you know what I mean? There's that sort of saying, like in terms of like different kind of textiles, or even like there's like bioplastics, or all the it's crazy, like I guess it's something most of us don't really, we think about or I think a lot of us think about plastic. It's become very it's very present in the media, like specifically kind of like plastic as something to focus on in terms of the whole climate emergency thing. But it's mad that, like you say, like somewhere in some lab at the moment they could be creating a material that will be like everywhere in 50 years. Like it's and also I think it's what you said at the very beginning kind of rings true, the idea that like it's just hard to actually know or see what's going to happen, because that's something that if it's a material that doesn't exist yet, or that we don't, then how can we know what it's going to be? It's we don't know like what sort of thing.
That's definitely something I find so fun about it. And there are a few candidates already now. I mean, the big exciting material for everyone. I'm trying to would like to check the date when the discovery of graphene obviously goes back quite a while in terms of it being known as an allotrope of carbon to researchers, but it was always a nightmare to produce, even for the purposes of studying. And actually, one of the funnest examples in my view of a Nobel Prize relates to this, which is that some researchers who they were looking at the problem, they didn't know, of course, what they were doing, but they needed to collect graphene, and so what they did was they got some graphite, like from a pencil, not from a pencil, but the same material, and they got some sellotape, and maybe it was particularly good sellotape, and then they placed the sellotape against the graphite, and then they pulled the sellotape off, and then a layer of graphene came off, and then they got the Nobel Prize.
And then they got the Nobel Prize.
They got the Nobel Prize. That's it. Like that's how they did it. Which again feels like more like striking gold than building something. But graphene it remains difficult to produce in large quantities. It remains very expensive. 1 gram is around $100 to produce. But if graphene was produced more cheaply, then especially if you and if people were able to produce carbon nanotubes cheaply from graphene, which is just graphene sort of folded onto itself, because graphene is like a layer of carbons that are hexagonal in orientation, and then if you can fold them, you can create carbon nanotubes of various sizes. And if we could do that cheaply, then that would be, I mean, I'm not saying it would do all the things that plastic does, but it would do many of them, and it would also do many things much better than not just plastic, but also concrete. I mean, the concept of a space elevator becomes slightly less ridiculous. If you
the old space elevator.
So that's one, I think, really good candidate. And I also, you do see it in people, like, if someone's on a really nice bicycle, they'll probably have some graphene.
Yeah. Like actually, the fact that you bring up concrete is also is you want to talk about, because isn't it like that the production of concrete
8% of CO2 emissions, I believe.
What did you say?
I believe it's 8% of CO2 emissions.
8%. Yeah, basically, yeah. Sorry, I'm going very slow.
Okay.
Yeah, you got there before me. Yeah, basically that it's a huge contributor to, like, it's not as in the news as plastic, but it's not great for the whole environment. And I don't know if there were different like building material, like building is a huge construction is a huge part of kind of very damaging to the environment, but we still are constantly doing it, and we're not going to stop building anything, So probably that's also an area where it'd be good to get a few new materials. Or
concrete is actually an area where people are looking into making alternatives. It is proving difficult because concrete's very good at what it does, and concrete, like the firing, like the amount of energy that goes into producing it is just huge, and that seems to be tremendously functional. There are concrete alternatives that have been made out of various things, including mushrooms. As you can expect, the mushroom one was definitely not that strong. There's some stronger ones. There's one that cleans pollution, actually. It's a concrete, a huge concrete block that's made so that it kind of gets air to pass through it, through these passive filtration systems, and it can actually have a substantial effect. But it's still got all the other problems associated with concrete. There are some more outlandish ideas, and I think this is a whole category of materials which I will sort of give one example. Maybe we'll mention a few others, but I don't think I can really dive into it in any depth. But at some point, I think it's going to become, it might seem strange to us now, it'll become easy for us to view kind of synthetic biological material as a material, right? Even though if you get sufficiently complex and you're doing it, the material itself will have substructure, and even if you don't. For example, one of the things that people have considered, although at the moment the lack of collagen makes it a problem. As in, you need collagen still to manufacture bone, to create large amounts of synthetic bone as a building material.
Whoa, weird.
I think it's
cool.
Really cool.
Yeah. Oh my god, like a bone house, bone skyscraper.
Indeed.
Wow. Bone bridge.
Yeah, and I think, and bone is, I mean, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but bone is tremendously strong.
I don't know if anyone's noticed. Yeah, I mean, much stronger than our flabby flesh. I mean,
it's doing nothing for us.
I mean, that's the yeah, but I guess, I mean, that's the whole function of bone, right?
yeah, and to be light as well, which is very, very important.
It holds up our flabby flesh, yeah.
Which is very important construction-wise. But yeah,
wow,
think
fascinating.
Once you open up and it is being opened up, like it's a very fast-moving field. The possibility of using biology to grow your materials, it's almost like when 3D printing came along, it was a paradigm shift in manufacturing in terms of how quickly you could change what you were producing and how precise you could be about the assembly process of kind of internal parts, etc. But that just doesn't hold a candle to what can be done by biological systems. Biological systems could, I mean, I think it's totally reasonable to say that it would be theoretically possible, although it might be just deeply impractical or not desirable or whatever, to engineer, say, a tree to grow with a house in it.
Oh my gosh, that's cool.
I don't see how that could be called impossible at all.
I don't see how that can be called impossible. Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, I feel like this. Yeah, I want to go more into this. This is really great. I mean, like another occasion we can go further into this growing trees with tree houses in them. Or I mean, like not to be specifically that.
I mean, there are people who have used living trees as materials in this sense, but not using synthetic biology, which is they just grow trees into frames, and trees are quite malleable.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I just think it's very realistic to imagine helping that process along, and for example, providing a nutrient source to trees, so as to permit them to grow faster. But for the rest of the episode, I was mostly talking about things that are established and real, and that actual scientists have come up with. That last part was just me. So, except for the bone. The bone is that's
bones are real. PSA out there. Even though you can't see them inside your body, they're there. Cool. Well, that was I love that. I mean, not just the bone thing, but also just it was good. The topic of materials and
it's a big good topic. Like I say, I think I'll have to dive back into it at some point.
Yes, it'll be great. Okay, but we've been going on for a while.
You're right.
But sorry, that's also. I wish now that I had to talk less about the translation thing, because there was a lot more things to. I mean, a lot to talk about in the material thing, which
that's okay. I think I had just enough time. The notes were very scattered, but it all one or two concepts. I think all these concepts were hit. We're all good. So if anyone's wondering why there's no music today, my computer, when it broke, I was going to go into a big material discussion about my computer, and I was going to mention silicon as a very good example of something where the specific nature of the material enabled huge changes in society. And also why people theorize, why silicon life could be a thing, etc. But that's that again, whole other topic, almost. And we don't.
It's a little teaser now
for the flash drive died, and everyone back up your stuff. Back up your stuff, guys, because otherwise it's gone forever. Like the music for this show.
So if anyone wants to write us a new theme tune,
I think hopefully Vic still has it saved.
Yeah. But that's a good. It's just a good PSA for us to go out on there about the F1 back up your stuff.
Absolutely.
All
right then.
So all those novels you've been writing during.
Yeah, all the novels are gone. Every single one.
I was talking more generally to the listeners out there, but yeah, your novel. I mean, it's terrible that we also have lost your novels. Um, yeah,
Class.
but
Okay.
yeah,
Well, I'll catch you next week,
more.
Joan. I look forward to
Yes,
the
it was.
topic.
Yeah,
And I'll go
good.
first.
Good chatting to you. And oh yeah, Josh is asking us to sing the theme tune, but Josh, I already asked. I already asked
I've
Patrick at the
got, I've
beginning
got,
when
now
he
this
told me
is,
this issue. I told him just hum it, but he said he couldn't even remember it,
no,
which is.
I'm afraid that I'm going to start singing the wrong, like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
you just
usually,
anything like the Simpsons.
my clarinet playing in the first episode didn't pull well. I'm sticking to the pop side.